colleagues of the education fraternity, but because without the understanding and cooperation of everyone in Jamaica, they will not recognize how critical education is for the future of each of our children and also for our nation's development. This was the central core of what I tried to say yesterday afternoon. And so we welcome you. I'm particularly sensitive to the regional directors who have come from far and wide across Jamaica, and to the principals of several of our schools who have received late emails but have left their posts and have made brisk journeys into Kingston. Has Mrs. Lewis reached yet? Mrs. Lewis from Schoolfield in Northeast St. Elizabeth got her email this morning, and she's on her way. That's the kind of cooperation that we are accustomed to and that we value so greatly. There were some issues that I, in the anxiety to finish in 45 minutes, yesterday afternoon did not mention, and which I think need emphasis. Morning, Madam Permanent Secretary. But I want to emphasize those this morning. But first and foremost, I'd like to ask you all to join with me in condoling with the families and natural families and school families of the 3 students who were murdered in Clarendon yesterday. I have spoken this morning with Mrs. Ebanks, the principal of the Garvey Maceo School, where Ricardo Briscoe had recently transferred to from Bustamante High. And she has recorded the presence of the counselors and other persons from Region 6 who are at her school doing what we are equipped to do and best able to do. And the same is true when I spoke to Mr. Harrison, the principal of Central High, whose student, 10th grade student, Alex Turner, was murdered. Details are sketchy. Mrs. Eubank says that her information is that Ricardo Briscoe and his schoolboy colleagues were coming from the gym, and they were simply observers of a fight and a killing that they paid their lives because of their open eyes. There weren't any of them, she makes me to understand, who were involved in any criminal activity at all. However, that's secondhand from her, and I trust that we'll get more details. But in any event, it emphasizes the vulnerability of our children and the resolve of the ministry and everyone here. And there is such a tremendous obligation on behalf of principals and school leaders to instruct their students how to avoid the dangers that society places them in, and also for us to all work towards a culture of peace and of reverence for life. So we share condolences with the families particularly, and with the school communities this morning. I hope this doesn't sound callous, but I was so happy to hear from Mrs. Eubanks and Mr. Harrison that both of their schools would continue operating instructionally today. When we face tragedies, we nonetheless have to face the realities of life. And I'm very happy that they haven't collapsed helplessly, but rather have in fact taken the necessary steps, but are seeking to uplift those who need to understand better who they are and what the purpose of school is. We mourn with them today. I've already paid tribute to the principals and permanent secretary. You may perhaps say more. And I'm inviting members of the media this morning. Don't let me be the butt of all of the questions and comments. These are the people who are the factors, the main factors of education throughout the country. And I would appreciate their comments, their concerns, your questions, whenever it is appropriate to do so. The role of the principal is of supreme importance in the efficiency of any school. And I draw your attention to the presence of Dr. Maurice Smith, the director of the National College of Education Leadership. We spoke about their successes yesterday, but I'm happy to tell you that they're also going to be forming an executive principals league, which should interest the country, because this will be a collective of the most experienced principals, not to preen themselves and to be garlanded wherever you see them, but rather to be the mentors and the guides of the over nearly 1,000 principals in public schools in Jamaica, many of whom can benefit, all of whom can benefit from continuous learning and from the networking that comes from the contact that will be there. Reverting to the issue of the students who have died tragically, one of the most appropriate things that I wish to tell you is that this morning we received a call from our partners, full partners, the Jamaica Teachers Association. The president called us and asked if we would join them with our statement of condolence and regret regarding that. You know, members of the media, principals, there are some who would like the JTA and the Ministry of Education to catch fight. And we will have differences from time to time, of course. But we have to be partners in education. And I'm here publicly stating that it has been a good year for partnership with the JTA. And I trust that we can, in fact, continue that process. I'd also like to thank the leader of the opposition and members of the opposition for their cooperation in education past and going forward. Yesterday, Mr. Holness in the Parliament seemed disturbed when I made the remark that the trend away from the shift schools was perhaps not as pronounced in the past as it is at present. And I simply want to give you the facts. I do not wish to denigrate anybody's effort. In 2007, 2008, there were 116 schools of all types on shift. By 2010, 2011, there were 107. That was the same number in 2011, 2012. There are now 82 schools on shift, and we are funded and resolute. Help me, that during this academic year, we will reduce that number to below 60. Below 60. 20 high schools will come off shift, and I think it is 11 primary institutions will also be relieved of the shift. We're not scoring points. We are all on the same pilgrimage. Some will have more intensity than others, and that's all that I was saying. But I just want to use the figures. The ministry has become data-driven, you know. We're not based on buttering up anybody or denigrating anybody. It's an idea of using the figures and facing the reality of what is the most central concern. Why is the shift system so important? Well, may I remind you again of something said yesterday. Permanent Secretary through Ms. Barbara Allen and the very helpful planning department of the ministry has shown us that when we look at the exam outcomes for single shift schools, they are 20% better than those schools which are on shift. Now, what does that data tell us? It tells us that we must be absolutely resolute in dealing with the elimination of the shift system. Started with very good intentions, operated with great verve in many places, but at the same time robbing our shift students of at least, as Mr. Radley Reed, my advisor, is careful to tell me, at least an hour instructional time for every day. Multiply that by 190, multiply that by 5 years in high school, and you understand the short change that we are faced with. We have got to deal with this. It is one of the priorities of this year and ongoing for the ministry. We ask everybody's understanding and cooperation. The other issue that has caused some input in the media recently is the comment I was constrained to make about CARE in the perception of what the decriminalization of small quantities of ganja and the legal permits for medical marijuana mean to our students. I reiterate, and I invite other principals who may have concerns or may wish to downplay what I'm saying, if they can, to speak later. But we are very concerned on the basis of early empirical evidence of students who feel that what came into force yesterday was a free-for-all for them to use ganja. I have had credible reports from 2 principals of students who have come to school under the influence of ganja, and that there is a strong subculture that feels that man-free and ganja-free. And I affirm what is reported in the press this morning, that we know of at least 2 students who have had to be hospitalized for apparent psychoses as a result of the use of ganja. I want to make it very clear. All smoking is bad for the health. All smoking. Yes? Ganja is not to be used and cannot help you to do better in your GSAT or your CSEC. And the strongest possible proscription of ganja use and any other substance use in our schools will be re-emphasized by the Ministry of Education. I don't even have to instruct the Chief Education Officer, Dr. McLean, to issue the strongest bulletin to our school population that disciplinary action will be taken, and there has to be a sturdy program to discourage drug abuse, substance abuse, call it by any epithet you wish, in our schools. It can't help you. You're heading down a dark and dead road if you choose to smoke weed as a child. Let us be absolutely clear about that. I support the decriminalization of small quantities of ganja and the removal of criminal records from those who have been benighted by that fact for so many years. I support that. I always have. But that is, there is no free-for-all, and there will never be any free-for-all as far as the Jamaican education system is concerned. Hope we can be clear on that. This takes us, however, to the broader issue of socialization of our students. Many schools, all of those represented here, the traditional schools, the non-traditional schools, though we don't use those phrases with any meaning anymore, the newer and the older schools, both know that considerable cramp is caused in the educational process by the poor social capital displayed by many of our students. I am filled with reports of teachers who have to labor to try and have order in their class and waste time in that regard. And I draw the media's attention to the ministry paper entitled Behavior Modification Intervention, which was tabled in the House yesterday. There are a suite of different measures that are appropriate to different age groups and different types of schools. The ministry on its own has a primary prevention strategy, which is inculcating proper values and attitudes and appropriate behavior models for young people from the primary right through to the end of the secondary cohort. The volume Valuable Pathways is going to be available to all schools. Why it was ever withdrawn, I'll never know. But it's back again, and it is a useful primer for use by teachers, churches, parents, for the whole tissue of values and attitudes appropriate to modern life in Jamaica. We are insistent that at the primary level too, students, particularly who have shown signs of instructional challenge or behavioral challenge, should be the subject to therapy, to diagnosis first, and to therapy. I invite you to investigate, members of the media, the Dreamer World Project, and which is headed by Kara Mensa, Professor Frederick Hickling, under the aegis of the Ministry of Education, which uses drama and cultural impulses to achieve change of behavior at the primary level. I invite you also to look again at the change from within and behavior resiliency programs headed by Mrs. Paula Chavans and Dr. Elizabeth Ward, both of which have a strong pedigree when utilized in high schools where there are similar difficulties. And many of the principals here this morning need to know more about that, and also to be questioned by you if you really are interested in how we can better comport student behavior to facilitate learning and overall citizenship. The civics program, which we instituted recently with an emphasis on Marcus Garvey's life and philosophy, is augmented this year through the excellent work of former minister, now reputed historian, Arnold Bertram, who has prepared for the Ministry of Education instructional material, primers, interesting, well-written, on our heroes. Volume 1 is Nanny and Sam Sharp. Volume 2 is George William Gordon and Paul Bogle. Volume 3, in fact, adds to our deposit of information on Garvey. And Volume 4 is the story of the leaders of the modern political movements, Norman Manley and Alexander Bustamante. I really should have raised these just as I'm doing now in Parliament yesterday, but nerves take me. But, you know, these are worthy of, they're excellently written. I commend them to the schools present, and I commend them to the media. And of course, while we have every confidence in the mass media, the commercial mass media, I'm pleased to tell you that the Education Broadcasting Network, which Dr. Kitania Petgrave, under the guidance of Dr. Franklin Johnson and others, I see Mr. Warren Vernon, have been advancing, is going to be a lively participant, a new and lively, what did people used to say? New and different? Yeah. Yes, well, new and different participant in the media landscape in Jamaica. We're now on over 20 cable channels, and we have access to free-to-air television and watch us on radio. What one of you say? Just look at us now. Yeah. And I'm happy to say that the best of education will not only be available in your classrooms, madam and sir principals, but also on the media. The best extra lessons are going to be available free-to-air and without cost on the mass media. That's a major step forward. We are using technology for the cause of education, and not just cognitive education, not just maths, English, and social studies, but also how to behave yourself. What are the values and attitudes? What are the things that uplift you as an individual? How do you establish your identity? What is the story of our people? How do we affirm our race, our class, our God-blessed nature? These are all the things. I long, members of the media, members of the education fraternity, to see the authors coming up and writing the soap operas that will lift up strong family life, that will lift up faithfulness in relationship between parents and children. Yes? Many of the social deficits which we see on the nightly news and read of and wag our heads in distress in the newspapers come from an absence of social capital. The Ministry of Education is one agency, but a strong agency. Everybody goes to school in Jamaica at some time, thank God. We have to stretch ourselves to ensure that we are, in fact, helping to purvey the values of the new Jamaica. I want to say the new Jerusalem. And the media TV guide, Sarah Bosi, The TV guide is available and will be on the ministry's website, and it has a suite of programs that are available to you now on all variety of things. Please look carefully at it, and we invite all to contribute to the build-out of local content. Khan Academy is great, but we want our local Khan Academy. We want our Jamaican soap operas, romances, tragedies, yes, which will teach our children what is a wholesome life. The ministry is also emphasizing the success of the transformation program, and I invite you to your attention to this document. In the welter of things, in the rush yesterday, I didn't pay sufficient attention to it. I want to pay tribute to the change management team in the Ministry of Education. I make particular reference to Ms. Jean Hastings, who has led this, and all of the others who have over 10 years made the process of educational transformation irreversible. There was a comment, or there has been some loose comment recently, that transformation really was stillborn. Well, this is not us. This is the World Bank's evaluation of what has happened. Yes? Come into our schools, compare with where they were 10 years ago. We're not scoring points. What we're doing is lifting up children, student achievement, adding value. And this is a record of this. And it goes on. We're not going to have another huge loan program that the taxpayers have to pay back on educational transformation. What we've done, and the presence of the National Education Inspectorate, the Parenting Commission, the Education Leadership College, and the Jamaica Teaching Council, yes, is to embed those transformative processes within the warp and the woof of Jamaica's education, so that it becomes our product. It becomes no more just the essence of consultants from here or mostly abroad. Huh? We can do it ourselves. When I was able yesterday to note Mrs. Lewis from Schoolfield. She's here. She's here. Yeah. Good morning, Mrs. Lewis. And thank you for making it, Mrs. Prim Lewis. Yes, this is a lady. She's benefited from leadership training. Yes, and she has brought her school in 18 months at grade 4, that critical level, from what? 33% mastery to 78% mastery. Mrs. Prim Lewis. Don't want to give anybody else red eye, you know, but I have it. The point we're making is that with solid leadership and commitment and fixity of purpose, we are well on the way to transforming the education system. I listened with such avidness to Minister McNeil, Minister Hilton, Minister Paulwell, the concerns of Mr. Samuda and Dr. Wheatley, yes? None of those plans, none of those ideas can work if education doesn't work. Right. This is far bigger than any individual, any political tendency, any professional concern. This is the holy grail that all of us have to be concerned of, and I congratulate Mrs. Lewis, and not her alone. She's emblematic of a new type of principle of behavior in our schools. It's not universal yet. There are plenty of gaps, yes? But when I see Mrs. Bolt from Holy Trinity High, I can tell you of a story in the great constituency of Central Kingston that is working so well, that is changing the whole character and texture of the students' attitude in this regard. And may I reserve to you to the list of principals who can be spoken of for their efforts. Another area that I wanted to speak about is what I call the new heart. And here's Dr. Wayne Wesley, the Executive Director of HEART. And I noticed Mr. Warrell Hibbert also of the Jamaica Foundation for Lifelong Learning. These are existing institutions, agencies of the ministry, but they have new verve and purpose. HEART has a creditable record. It has a reputable and steady source of income. But the new heart it moves away from the institutional training of workers, Jamaican persons, and move towards enabling training to take place in the schools, in the community, and at the workplace. What we must do is to facilitate those who are actually carrying out the tasks of the economy. Some training must take place in the classroom setting, in the workshop setting, but better training takes place at the actual site of experience gaining. How many times do you hear people saying, I have a certificate, but I can't get a job because I don't have experience? This is why HEART is a player, in fact, the originator of the revised apprenticeship program. Sorry, Professor Gossett Oliver, that distinguished former apprentice and leader of the apprentice movement at UTech and in Jamaica isn't here this morning. But this is a vital way of establishing competencies, not just certification, you know, competencies based on ability to do things, do tasks that will enable our students to be much more work ready, both here and happily abroad. Mr. Hibbert, we give you credit that JFFL, taking a long time to rev up the engine, but has been able that the high school equivalency diploma is accredited in the United States and Canada now, yes? And therefore, when we open this, and we don't need to talk about new institutions and renting new buildings or building anything. Every schoolroom, every church hall should be used to help those people in our society, the majority, who for one reason or another never had the chance of getting a high school education, to wheel and come again, to start where they are and take the time and reach that conclusion. And not just a high school diploma. How many good examples do we have of those who have done that and then gone on to further education? Some have doctorate now. This is the direction of human achievement that can undergird and be the foundation for all the other types of development that Jamaica seeks. Another hot issue, this is of another aspect, another effort of the new HEART is the Unattached Youth Initiative. This year, HEART has funded what I don't want to call an experiment. It is a new venture of attacking the problem of unattached youth in our society. And we're hoping to touch 15,000 youth in our community development initiatives, where young people will be taught, depending on where they are, the rudiments of a skill, personal development, because that is regrettably but factually a necessity, and thirdly, their literacy and numeracy will be improved. And I urge you to question Dr. Wesley fully on how this is going to be rolled out, and members of the media to watch it, members of the educational fraternity, encourage the youth in your communities, because you're leaders outside of the school as well, to take advantage of this venture. We must, over 5 years, do two things: prevent the hemorrhage of failed youth coming out of schools and adding to the unattached youth population, which is the incubus of crime and antisocial behavior. And at the same time, we must, by a program such as HEART is putting forward, erode that perhaps 150,000 strong cohort that is on the streets at present. Before finishing, I'm going to go back for one crucial area within the schools. It takes us to grade 7. It has to do with resocialization. Grade 7 is usually the 12 going into 13-year-olds. That's a time of puberty. That's a time when you come into a new school, a high school, with all of the excitement and good prospect that's there. It's a time for us to rethink what we do. Many students in preparation for GSAT have done much of the work, the curriculum coverage that happens in grade 7. Certainly after the grade 6 examination, they tread water for 5-6 months before they go into grade 7. We need to use that time. Use that time purposefully for personal development. First of all, the truth is that many of our students do not achieve the levels of literacy and numeracy in the GSAT at the 6th grade level that will allow them to benefit fully from the expensive and inestimably valuable high school experience. It is a time to curb it then, not to let it escalate into grade 8 and grade 9 and grade 10, and where you have the indignity and the embarrassment of children after that level of education coming out of school and can't read and write properly, can't speak a paragraph of English, can't handle themselves with appropriate mathematical skills. Stop at grade 7. Deal with it there, principals, supervisors of grade 7. Please, I don't want to say put aside the curriculum, but subordinate the curriculum to getting to know your students. Many of you are doing it already. Have fulsome orientation programs. If it lasts 1 term, fine. If you need 2 terms, take it. Make sure that the young people are adjusted to know themselves. Yes? Teach them through the valuable pathways, through civics, through participation in uniform groups, through exposure to any of the resocialization measures that we're outlining here. How to love themselves, not in a narcissistic way, but to be proud of their color, to be proud of their origin, not to be ashamed of who they are or where they have come from, as if those were termini of their lives. Find out whether they're challenged in any way. Some may need a pair of glasses. Some may need some more breakfast. Some may need a mentor, because we know that over 40% of our children don't have knowledge of their father or any effective relationship with him. So this is a time for the high school to really ensure what are the rules of the school, what are the instances of respect and behavior that must be inculcated at the time. And very importantly, after Donald Quarry and Kalisha, and I forget the name of the young girl at Frome Technical. Yes? Yes, Santoy. After that, can we begin to teach them about interpersonal relations, about sexuality, about what is appropriate and what is not? That Lego-based behavior may be part of the counterculture of the weekend. It's not even weekend anymore, it's every night. Yes? But that they are called to a higher purpose, that there is a dignity and holiness that they can bespeak in their lives. That grade 7 we want to elevate as a point of quintessential re-socialization. Of course it must take place, must start before. Of course it is a responsibility of the home and the community. But the fact is that we must deal with the reality we have now. And that's an important new program that we are going to advance this September in our schools. I was sorry to have spoken yesterday before the signing of an agreement for a new wage agreement, wage in terms of a condition of work agreement with the teachers of Jamaica. It would have been nice to have been able to celebrate that. The responsibility of the levels that can be afforded by an economy which is working itself out of debt and is under considerable fiscal strictures is not mine, and I will not speak to it. But what I want to say today, and to open myself and the ministry for questions, for criticism if necessary, is that the Ministry of Education stands behind the good teachers of Jamaica in their claim and hope for a livable wage and for better working conditions. And it's not just a mouthwater and a word thing. We are looking at our budget and going over every line item to see what adds value and what can be placed to improve the condition of our teachers. It is true that many of our teachers are owed money for studies that they undertook, and we are making arrangements for them to be paid as quickly as possible. We are making arrangements to help those teachers who have retired, and many of whom are waiting for months and regrettably, shame, you see, sometimes even years to get their pension, for that to be a thing of the past, so that within a few months we can clear the backlog, and with proper arrangements that situation won't occur. There are certain allowances that teachers need in order to perform their duties and are peculiar to them. And if we can find within our budget the funds to do that, by doing more with what we have rather than being simply satisfied in keeping the system going, then it is our sincere effort to do so. And there are useful discussions taking place with the Jamaica Teachers Association in this regard. I'm a creature of direction these days, and I'm told that there are other matters that should be raised, but I think I've said enough on the points I wanted to emphasize. I thank you once again for your commitment to education and look forward to hearing further from the Permanent Secretary and most importantly from you all. Thank you.
It is always a privilege to come to this sort of a gathering where we can truly allow ourselves to be held up to scrutiny. And we wish for our press colleagues to do that this morning. Quite often, Honourable Minister, when we speak, we hope that we're grounded in the experience on the ground. We have not, I don't think, in the past, invited principals of our schools who are really the people who are on the ground working through the system to be present with us at a meeting such as this. And so, Minister, it gives me great pleasure to, even before I recognize members of staff from the Central Ministry and our regional offices, to recognize the presence of some of our principals who have traveled to be with us this morning. And I really would like to invite colleagues from the media houses to speak with those principals, these principals, because they will tell you or they will give you the evidence that we have presented in our achievements in education. They're the ones on the ground who are causing things to happen. In a moment, I'll come back to the introductions, but quite often we criticize and scrutinize ourselves, and that's fine. And we talk about what we have not done and what we have not been able to do and what we can't do. But I think time has come now for us to say what we have done and how we have managed to do what we have done, and as well as outlining the sorts of things that we will do to continue to improve our performance. And the minister has always said that we do what we are doing with what we have. He's a thrifty person. He knows how to get us to do more with what we have. We have had no more to do more with what we need to do. So let me just go to recognizing, first of all, our colleague principals who are here. Mrs. Nadine Malloy Young, Principal, Arden High School, leading in her field. Mrs. Margaret Bolt, transforming in her field, Holy Trinity. Mr. Kevin Jones. Mr. Kevin Jones, are you here? Welcome, Mr. Jones. Good to see you. He is from Mona High School, a silently improving institution. You've been doing that, building on the foundations that were laid for you. Is Mrs. Murray here? Heather Murray? No, I haven't seen her. Hampton, but you can call Mrs. Murray. Hampton High School. She is currently the chair of the Secondary Schools Principals Association. Principal of the Year. Mr. Lawrence Rowe, Mile Gully High. Where's Mr. Wright? A young principal who before that was vice principal at that school. Were you not at Mile Gully under the Centers of Excellence Mutual Building Societies program? And I think it was last year, TVJ did an excellent piece, documentary on Mile Gully and some other schools who were doing well. Mrs. Prim Lewis, Minister mentioned her, Schoolfield. These are colleagues from Region 5. Miss Akiba Haas. Is she here? She's a principal, you could call her. She's a rural, she works at Morgan's Pass. And she is an excellent principal, doesn't want to leave rural Clarendon at all. She feels that that's where she's called and that's where she needs to work. Mr. Roger Curlew, Oh, good. From Cassava River Primary School. Mr. William Willis. Are you here? I didn't see Mr. Willis this morning. No. Dr. Ankle, leading with passionate Jonathan Grant. No. Dr. Austin Wright? No. Is Mrs. Kassan Troop, building on a foundation and consolidating improvement in quality education down at Denby. I have to make people know that they can talk to you, you know. So, Mr. Aston Messam, Bridgeport? Didn't see him, no. Paul Loftus, Urakobesa High. Yeah, Mr. Loftus. And Mr. Martin Murphy, Freehill Primary. Thank you. So, colleagues.
For us to reframe how our young people think. It surprised me when I realized that so many of them thought that the decriminalization of ganja meant a free-for-all. I thought we were past that stage. It really struck me when I recognized that so many of our young persons are wanting to be receivers rather than doers, not wanting to inquire as much as they should inquire. But to put it simply, we have a problem right across Jamaica now in our high schools as we approach the examination period, the external examination period, where many of our fifth formers and sixth formers are just simply not coming to school. They don't consider the discipline that is required for attendance, punctuality, and all of those things to be important. And it may seem that I'm going to specifics, but when we look at something like that, it is important. And so this reframing of values and attitudes, it really is very important, and it is something that I think we should embrace and begin to more fully develop. Would that be an appropriate enough comment? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Malloy.
Morning, Minister and your team. Morning, colleagues.
Morning.
Much of what has happened at Mona High School, I wish I could take credit for it, but I proudly stand on the shoulders of my predecessors. But as a new principal of Mona, I'm in the business of capacity building. And I normally tell my teachers that any decision that we make at the school, if we can't see how it is that the students will benefit, then we're not going there. So every decision that is made at Mona High School, we have to see that trickling down effect, how the students will be impacted positively. Now, I'm going to mention something which is a little bit different from what Mrs. Malloy had said. As educators, of course you know about this, but there are many factors which contribute to the performance of students in our school system. And all the research in all continents have shown that the single most factor which is responsible for student performance is the quality and competence of a teacher in each classroom. All the research has shown that. Even if education is not valued at the home, the research has shown that if you put a qualified, competent teacher in each classroom, then students will be inspired to learn. So, on that note, I take issue at times with JTA because, as a principal, because to be honest, we have teachers, educators in the system who are not competent, not qualified, and we have to, a part of our transformation, Mrs. Foster Allen, is to ensure that all our teachers are qualified and competent. Now, my colleague principals, especially the ones who are the so-called veterans in the system, we have to ensure that we become a little bit more neutral where JTA is concerned. I am saying that as a principal. Because on the one hand, it becomes a little bit difficult to part ways with some teachers, and then it's the JTA that is going to back them, even if all the evidence has shown that it's time for this teacher to go. And so my colleague principals, I'm going to throw it out there, that we need to be a little bit more neutral. Maybe we need to have that league of principals that has been mentioned, so that we can be more effective in our roles and responsibilities as school leaders and chief instructional officers. Thank you so much.
In dealing with the whole issue of ganja smoking among students, will there be perhaps maybe a short-term campaign or anything of such nature?
Thank you very much. Yes, they're on several fronts. First of all, every school principal, every school teacher, every school personnel already knows, they're conscious adults, what dangers there are in respect of substance abuse. So I expect that without any prompting, they on their own will have and will continue now with zeal and emphasis to warn their students. But this is a broader problem than just the schools, and the schools are influenced, obviously, by the broader community. And the ministry will be issued clear instructions enjoining that school rules must be adhered to, and that positive measures must be taken to encourage students to not to indulge themselves. Beyond that, my colleague, Minister Golding, tells me that that ministry will be launching a full-scale educational program. It's an interministerial thing. No doubt the Ministry of Health would be involved as well, and Youth and Culture, maybe others. But we would want to be part of that, and if necessary, have our own swing to it, to ensure that we do not squander the gains of resocialization, bespoken by all of these measures that we have mentioned, and by the long-time consistent events of so many teacher heroes and heroines, and parents, other people of goodwill, because of some expediency of this new misunderstanding. So at every level, we're going to ramp this up. Hold us to that.
Darren?
From Mona, left off in relation to having competent and qualified teachers in the classroom. How are you dealing with that issue, and what has been the experience dealing with the JTA on this matter? And if I may just have a second question, since I know my colleagues will be coming in, but in relation to your education broadcasting network, the network there, pardon me for being parochial, but my little country school them, and I know they're not offended because I'm a countryman myself, from rural Jamaica. Though you have the free-to-air element in the form of Love TV, the fact that they won't really reach the crevices and corners of the Landiaway, the Epping Farm, the Penline Castle, and so on. I have to speak for those areas because those are the areas that I roamed as a youngster. I'm wondering what element is there in this program to ensure that there's a balancing act in the sense that while you're providing content for people in mainly the urban areas, that those in rural Jamaica are not left behind.
Thank you very much. Maybe Dr. Johnson or Dr. Petgrave will add to this. Can I take that last question first, Doreen? They may not be able to reach, to access free-to-air television, but I don't know that there are many districts in Jamaica, even Westphalia, where I'm familiar with, has cable, access to cable. That has become quite ubiquitous. And we recognize that at this stage we may not be able to cover everywhere, but I think the combination of free-to-air and cable will give us the best possible reach that technology allows at this time. And always we remember that remarkable aphorism of Nettleford, of inward reach and outward stretch. It applies here. The other issue to do with the competence and of our teachers. The legislation is coming, which will premise licensing of teachers on the particular competencies. And we've gone through extremely laborious consultation, and the bills are ready now for the legislative process. I'm referring to the Jamaica Teaching Council Act and bill, soon to be an act, and the revision of the 1980 Education Code. Some of the rules that we have inherited are unwieldy and unsustainable. A teacher is tenured in a vacant post where they have acted for 1 year, pretty much for life, in that institution. That is not a sustainable situation. It has made for a mismatch between needs and skills, and it has placed us in a quandary in respect of matching competencies with outcomes. The figures I gave in my speech yesterday speak for themselves. 780 of our 1,700 math teachers haven't taken math, have no qualification in it. It gets worse in the sciences. No, we don't want anybody to lose their job, please. We want everybody to thrive, but you can't thrive as you are or maybe where you are. We're not asking for the ministry to be able on a whim to move somebody from Morant Point to Negril. But we are saying that within your quality education circle, within your parish, within your educational region, we must use competencies to meet the needs of our children. Otherwise, what will happen is that the education system is serving the needs of some smaller interest rather than the interest of the children. Can't be. And so we're not vexed with anybody. We're just saying that this has to change. And I'm pleased to tell you that there has been a good understanding with the leadership of the Jamaica Teachers Association towards these ends. We have difficulties in terms of the modalities, how it's going to work. But may I give you an indication? We posited a new system of voluntary redeployment. We can't move a teacher, you know. Yes? Because the Ministry of Education, you, the taxpayers, we acting for you, pay the teachers, but we don't employ them. The school boards do. But we ask for the voluntary redeployment. And I think Dr. McLean will tell me 235 of the target that we set for 300 this year have made that move. And we had a number last year who did the same. It's not enough, but it's an indication of where we could go. Can we call upon the goodwill of everybody in order to be able to make the realignment that is so necessary a reality?
Bertram?
Yes, there was mention of extending the school semester based on because of the Riverton fire. I would like to get an update on that decision.
There's an obligation that instructional days does not include sports days, Jeans Day, Girls Day, or anything, Parents Day. Those are all good things, but the code says instructional days. And when days are lost because of public health reasons, because of national emergencies, as in the case of the Riverton dump, it is the obligation of the school to make up those days. Yes, and I am convinced that this is an obligation understood by the schools and carried out by them in large part.
Any other questions from colleagues? I'll go ahead tomorrow.
Last question. Yesterday you mentioned in terms of the agreement that you have with UE in terms of allowing for students to be able to do their exams and then they can pay. No, yeah, something like that. So they do the exams and then the results are held until they pay their fees then. Yeah, that's it. And then you were calling for UTech to come on board. But is there any, like a structured plan to put in place to approach like other tertiary institutions to have that kind of agreement to allow the students then more time to pay at the tertiary level?
The government of Jamaica has particular leverage with the University of the West Indies, which it is a participating member of, and which it supports in the region of $9 billion annually. The government of Jamaica is the owner of the University of Technology. However, these are mature, self-governing institutions, and it ill behooves either to find it necessary for the ministry to issue edicts to them. They must organize themselves in a mature and responsive way and recognize, like every other school must, that they exist for the students. The students don't exist for them. And one recognizes, I wish to say as well, that those institutions have very, very difficult strictures of cash flow. And frankly, some people tie them out in the payment of monies, just as they used to tie out the Student Loan Bureau, but I'm glad to say they're doing much, the SLB is doing much better now. I've told people the story. I'm digressing a little, but I think it makes a point. I've told people the story of the guy who, on one of those campuses, really cussed me royally about how we were being tough at the Student Loan Bureau, which actually falls under the Ministry of Finance, in requiring that he pay back his loan. And when I persuaded him that it was really a good thing to do because his repayment would allow another student to get the benefit that he had, he agreed with me but said he would be glad to start paying back after his car payments. Now, I hope that's an extreme and isolated case. I wonder if it is, though. But so I'm sympathetic with the universities, but it makes no sense for a person to be late in their payment, as many of us have to be on behalf of our children, or if we're self-supporting, because of economic strictures. And then the money is accepted for a debt that is owed, perhaps for last year, and we're told that because you're late, you have to sit out this year. That's destructive. And we stand ready to work with the institutions to ensure that in difficult economic times, we take time with each other, and we stop having circumstances which in fact deny the very end to which we are all committed, which is the certification of more and more of our young people. Allow me a last sentence. You principals need to, if you could, pat yourselves on the back, because so many more of the students you superintend, yes, from the lowest quintile of the population are now emerging certified for tertiary education. Yes? It is a problem we are glad to have. These are students who usually are the first person in their families to ever begin to think of going to university. Yes? I believe there's some of you in this room who fall into that category. Yeah? And one thing the Prime Minister always says to us, she says, for goodness sake, try find a way to keep them there. The government cannot take on the full responsibility of tertiary costs. People must begin to save. Yesterday, I congratulated the Educom Cooperative Credit Union. That's an amalgamation of A squared, M squared, and UWI Credit Union. And they've come together, and their principal purpose, not their sole one, but their principal purpose is to offer financing for education. That's good. Yeah? That stands in contrast to I believe, please don't hold me to this, but the very high percentage, I've heard figures of 40% of commercial credit from our financial institutions which go to buy a car. Hello? Where are our priorities? Yes? You need the education in order to be able to afford the car. But if you don't have the education, then how the car come? We have to have the proper priorities with respect to nutrition, with respect to contribution to schools, and especially for contribution to the cost of tertiary education. And so I applaud the University of the West Indies and many of the teachers' colleges too. Yes? Mrs. Foster Allen used to be a principal. Yeah. Dr. Pinnock is here. And if there's a genuine case, not scamp now, but a genuine case, look, I can't really pay this, but can I take my exam? And I'll wait on the results. You hold the results until I can pay it. Surely that is the kind of spirit that we want to engender in our education system. That's a transformed spirituality.
Thank you. Any more questions, media colleagues? Is that a media man or just a principal? Go ahead.
Principal, thank you very much for the suggestion. We need to use, Dr. Petgrave, I hope you're listening, our EBN facilities for issues of special education as well. And teacher professionalism. We've now asked our teachers' colleges to ensure that every person training as a teacher gets education to deal with special needs. I want it to become a requirement. If you don't have that, you won't be certified, because we know that up to 20%, 15 to 20% of our students have special education needs. I am urging grade 1 teachers and principals of primary schools, check out your children, use the JOILP, which is a grade 1 test, to your advantage. And we now no longer want you to have the information about a child and not the wherewithal to deal with it. As I announced yesterday, the Vouch Clinic on West Racecourse is open to deal with challenges, behavioral, intellectual, at the early childhood level. There are facilities in Port Antonio, in St. Anne's Bay, here in Kingston, and soon in Mandeville and Montego Bay for not only diagnosis, but specialized treatment of our special ed students. And I'm asking you to insist that we ramp up those sufficiently so that you as a principal are not faced with a problem that it stares you in the face, but neither you nor the families can effectively deal with. Are we there yet? No, but we're getting there fast. We're adding value.
Go ahead, Darren, and then I'll take this.
Minister, just a quick one. In relation to the Dream World project, there were plans for, I believe, for its expansion beyond the 34 schools. Can you give us some timelines and perhaps the number of schools you intend to expand it to? And since I have the mic, I remember, I think, in fact, looking at one of your ministry paper in relation to attendance at school, one of the recommendations there was for the introduction of an island-wide school bus system, and that has been on the table for some time. Can you tell us what's the thinking there, not just at the ministry level, but also at the cabinet level, if you can speak of that?
Sure. I personally endorse the Dreamer World project, which for detail is a program of behavior modification based on cultural reorientation, the use of drama, the use of self-expression, of group work in order to modify behavior. I think we need to see how it works on a medium scale, which is moving from, I think, 4 schools to 35 schools. And I know that Dr. Hickling and his team are engaged in helping us to source funds externally, and we make a local commitment as well to expand it. I can't give you numbers yet, but the hope is that we can multiply that as the evaluation. We're not just doing things because they look nice, we're doing things because they are nice and we evaluate them. Yes? In that regard. And it's one of many programs. It does look very promising. As far as the transportation is concerned, we want to encourage people to adopt the Maypen model. Mrs. Troop, that's helping. Yes. The Homewood model, which has worked very well so far. But it has to be tailored to local circumstances. I would appreciate if quality education circles or regional officers can pull together groups of principals who can say, well, look, transportation can be organized radiating from these points to a center where a school is. The Ministry of Transport and Works has a team that they are helping to organize this. We'll give you the best practices. But it is not something which the Ministry of Education can do more than encourage. We can't take the responsibility for that. It has to be at the local level. I urge one other thing. $75 million have been put aside in the budget for the second year to fund a path transportation allowance. With the greatest of respect, I think it is best if that money is dispensed by the schools rather than given to the parents. When it goes to the parents, it runs a risk of getting mixed up. Yes? When the schools administer it, a concerned principal or a guidance counselor or a dean of discipline is going to know better and administer it in a better way. I'm hoping that the educational community would support that change that I think is necessary, and in due course, we can see how it can be expanded.
Thank you. We take a question from our principal, and we wrap after this one.